Trees are the lungs of planets, whose plants' contribution to the development of life and our civilization is difficult to overestimate. We would be without they didn't survive. But they still can't live without us. Their adaptability is amazing. Imagination trees are the most majestic of all living beings, and about the most incredible ones, I tell you today, and I'll tell you. Let's go to survive in the deserts, where there is no rain for many months. For trees, you need to have certain the abilities of. These giants are just they adapted to this for a reason. They look like barrels. These are baobabs. Trees live for thousands of years. They survive thanks to the superpower to store hundreds thousand liters of water inside the sponge wood of its thick trunk. In fact, in front of you are real water tanks, and this ability to store water serves as the scourge of this plant. The fact is that it has become a magnet for various animals that chew its wood to quench your thirst, especially standout elephants in the dry season. Wet wood, the baobab, becomes almost the only source of water in the distance paths to a watering hole. Water from wood literally saves their lives, but from this the trees' thoughts don't get any easier. But can you blame the poor elephants? Even if people willingly chew the damp wood of these trees in the middle of the desert, these trees, as if oasis, simply wouldn't be here without them. Luckily, baobabs have to survive incredible abilities, self-healing porous wood, and then grow new bark, and do it again and again over the centuries. People have island of Madagascar quickly figured out how to use these magical properties. Tree. The fact is that on the western part Madagascar, droughts are so bad, long-lasting, that there are almost no others. Trees cannot survive. Baobabs for years can live without a single drop of rain thanks to the warm, moist air we blow. From the Indian Ocean to the east, Madagascar experiences heavy rainfall. However, the mountains do not allow this rain to fall. On the west is why huge ones appeared here, deserts, and this arid landscape stretches almost to the west coast, and about 30 kilometers away is the village of Apoka. Now its drought, sometimes temperature reaches 40 degrees Celsius in the shade. There was no rain anymore 10 months. Every day is a struggle for survival. Nearest water supply in 60 kilometers from here. There is so little water that they cook food in the liquid of melon or watermelon. Yes, and they are already ends with these two villagers heading towards their secret of survival to the baobab tree. Actually a baobab, this is the reason why people's lives in these places. Baobab is generally possible called the tree of life for these people. At life, a large trunk accommodates so much water that only a few trees can help an entire village survive the annual drought. The fact is that, as I already said, the baobab has extraordinary ability to survive after very deep wounds. This tree has incredible resilience. This allows you to hollow out its soft trunk from the inside to create a water reservoir, and the tree won't die. It's just within 6 months grow bark in the inner parts and will become waterproof. It turns out to be a living well or a living barrel. To dig a woman you need more than 2 weeks is hard work. They should dig only in the dry season. It is important to choose the right period for digging, but also choosing correctly. Woman, otherwise he can rot, and then I'll die in the rainy season. All the women Zava can no longer be touched by appearance. Leaves also tells us that now is not the right time for digging up baobabs. Everyone knows this village, even children, and there is one very important thing that is needed, must be observed after digging bababa, is to wait at least 6 months before filling it with water, otherwise a catastrophe. He faces death. People fill the tree with water during this short rainy season is alive. The tank can store thousands of liters water, and at the same time the baobab does not rot even for decades. Of such exploitation is an exceptional phenomenon in plant life. This time the drought in the world is so long that the tree is already empty. No less than the reservoir needs care periodically. Cut off growing wood differently, the volume of the tank will decrease. Even though there is water in this reservoir has dried up, but these villagers inherited 7 more of these from their ancestors. Only one had its water left. Try to stretch it out as long as possible. I also have to wash myself once a month. It is prohibited to do laundry and cooking near trees to avoid temptation to spend more carelessly water than required, but when water you have to drag hundreds of meters from the tree home. He spends it willy-nilly, more thoughtfully. After each season people collect rain as quickly as possible. Water near the baobab and pour it inside the whole village works because you need to have time to fill the baobab, while there is water did not evaporate, and this happens very quickly in many old Bao women herself. A hollow core appears on its own without participation of people. There are several different theories of the reasons for this process. There is so much inside that they find there's here house, not only various animals, but also people. Hollow baobabs were used in as grave warehouse stores, crypts, and even as a cafe in South Africa, until recently. Inside one very old baobab tree at a bar which attracted many tourists. See this unusual thing every year. More than 7,000 people visited the establishment. By the way, this baobab is one of the largest in the world. At least it was in 2017. The old tree collapsed, destroying the bar. There are even legends that hollow baobabs used as temporary prisons. The paths to the city could also be temporarily keep slaves, as baobabs often grow where the route used to run slave trade. Baobab, thanks to its ability to survive in deserts, opportunity for many species to live here, animals, and tens of thousands of people. But there are trees that choose another desert survival strategy than baobab. They do not have wide trunks storing huge amounts of water, but there's something different here in the desert on Socotra, a distant island in Arabia. The sea, the dry season is cruel, however it is a strange tree can survive it. The key to his survival in the desert in his unusual shape. This is Dracaena dragon. These trees grow on the top of the hills where the soil is very poor, but there is good soil replacement. Sparse morning dew covers ground, drops condense on large dense leaves, liquid flows to the middle of the trunk, and then water to the roots. This is too valuable a product to lose even a drop. But the drops that fell on the earth is not completely lost. Spreading dense crown tree works like an umbrella. Its shadow is enough to water manage to seep into the sand. In addition to this, crown also provides shade to the roots, lying almost at the surface. In this, another similar tree grows in the desert. For a miniature version of the baobab, the adenium trunk is the same as the baobab, stores a lot of water to survive until the arrival of the rains. The tree is so hardy what grows on bare rocks, but there are deserts in which the existence of no tree is impossible in principle. For example, if the desert consists of huge sand dunes such as Taklamakan in northern China, is an ever-changing. The sandy landscape here is extreme temperature changes, and most importantly, rain practically never happens. People with rudiments common sense will say that trees cannot survive in such conditions. Principle, however, nature is ready to argue. Afraya grows here right on the dune's top, and he is not alone here. They are not just they survive here so much it's comfortable that some of these trees more than 1,000 years. How they manage exist in such conditions. The point is that nature rewarded them amazingly long roots that collect water and also connect neighboring trees into a common network. Therefore, if one, others will be able to get water from the trees divided. But in some trees, living conditions are even harsher than in any. The desert in front of you is extremely unusual picture of a tree growing in the middle of the sea. According to the rules of biology, salt water should have killed him a long time ago, but for some reason don't kill this mangrove tree quietly. It's blooming. How is that even possible? This plant has an interesting ability. When the tide begins to fall, mangrove tree covered with warty growths surrounded by pores capture air into these growths. When the water returns, floods the roots, these growths begin let water into the plants, but filter out 99% of what they contain. Salts. Salt residues accumulate in a few unnecessary leaves that turn yellow, and then just fall off. Such a brilliant solution. Mangrove superpower led to the appearance, over time, huge mangrove forests right on the ocean coast. Is hard to believe, but this whole forest goes under everyday water at high tide, and then drained at low tide. Time in these places, oceanic water during high tide penetrates into kilometers inland. Mangrove trees, it took millions of years of evolution to adapt to something like this. Other trees in the world wouldn't be here. Survive such an unusual forest creates extremely strange things in front of you. Mangrove tree Rizzo, its trunk is not reaches the ground. Instead of him with her, there is a network of giant roots that keep the tree soft, and leafy mud floats into the forest at high tide. There are a lot of fish but many of them are lazy to go this route every time because at low tide they do something out of the ordinary. Yonder coming out inside some roots, fallen trunks have tunnels, does a special kind of sea clam when the level is decreases. The fish swim into these holes, ebb continues roots, and tree trunks end up on dry land, but fish are safe in water-filled corridors. Inside the tree, yes, they exist trees with fish living inside them, phenomenal. But if you think that life inside a tree is carefree, that's not how. A few hours go by at first low tide, and the water inside the tree becomes less, and that's why these bulls swim further into the labyrinth. However, even there are predators inside the tree. Hunt these fish. It's miniature octopus, and he waits patiently. It's experienced. He's a hunter. But he's not always lucky, while the fish are trying to hide from octopus in the dark water inside a tree continues to end all beings. The tide-dependent ones await him returning a few hours later. Finally the water comes and floods mangrove forests and flows into tunnels. Trunks of tiny bulls begin move. These persistent little fish survive without water for 6 hours. They leave their safe labyrinths so that the floors, microscopic plankton, which sea water brought in addition to fish and love. Octopuses and mangroves, live worms. Tier Dennis dy. Although this is not worms and this type of mollusk, they are make moves using modified shell and grow to meters in length thanks to these creatures into these trees and Pisces swims. These worms have become a real delicacy, and people go into mangroves looking for them. Forests are looking for trunks perforated by these creatures, and then cutting. There are shellfish in it. Some even eat them in raw. Fine mangroves inside which living here. Dennis is very difficult. Be an experienced seeker, sometimes hunters lucky, and they stumble upon a real one. The jackpot tree is overcrowded worms to the delight of local residents, who immediately arrange a feast. When the tree is cut by the worms die instantly since the air is destructive for them. You need to rip your head off. Sometimes real ones are found in trunks. Giants can't swallow it whole live, but inside trees there are more interesting things in almost every part. Planets, while walking in nature, you can run into. On here is such an unusual picture. The trees are called devilish. The fire is raging right inside them, and they burn like that. This phenomenon may occur for several days in nature. It is not at all uncommon for people to do this. Don't put your hand to it. This happens due to natural processes. The spectacle is both mesmerizing and frightening. Reason for this phenomenon: blow lightning that strikes dry and hollow trunk. As a result, the tree begins to burn from the inside and outside for a long time, remains unharmed inside a hollow trunk. Often good draft and fire are formed, spreads vertically, but also happens exactly the opposite picture when from trees flowing water. These shots were filmed in Montenegro. Locals call it water tree for 30 years. Fountain made of this mulberry tree. Periodically simple explanation begins to erupt. This is the mountainous area here. Underground there are many springs, and after a rain their pressure has intensified, and the water is flowing through the hollow trunk up, and sometimes meet trees from which blood flows. Or rather, it's not blood. Of course, it's the color tree sap, but it looks like this, looks like blood, that it becomes creepy. It's worth breaking a branch and a tree, as if there is bleeding on our planet. Several types of trees with this colored juice, including Dracaena dragon, to whom I told earlier this red tree sap was used as dye back in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Yes, even today they still find him application in folk crafts, furniture, perfume, and cosmetics industry. They also like to use this juice in folk medicine, but there are trees from which flows something more valuable, milk, and people get it in the same for the purpose of extracting ordinary cow milk. Milk tree, like many other mulberry representatives, are highlighted milky juice, but unlike milky juices of other plants, it is not poisonous, but quite edible and tasty. Unlike real milk, milky milk juice, which has a thicker viscous consistency and balsamic aroma, thickens after exposure to air and becomes like cheese or cottage cheese. This milk does not spoil within a week even in tropical climates, mixes well with water in any proportions without collapsing. It widely used by the local population in food as a replacement for cow's milk when boiling. It releases on its surface wax used for making candles and chewing gum, but not any milk tree. You can drink many other types milk juice is not suitable for consumption. Nevertheless, it is also extracted for food, which is hard to believe, but from it make rubber, more precisely rubber, which then more than 60% is processed into rubber. Natural rubber is used for making car tires. That's all. These items are made from the sap of tree A to invention of synthetic rubber in general. All the rubber in the world was made from this juice. Transports us to the jungle. Here every plant is forced to fight for a place in the sun, because of dense vegetation only 2% of rays reach the ground, and therefore low plants not up to getting what they need. So much live sunlight competition here. Cruel. 300 years ago, this is a hura tree began my pursuit of light. Every day it absorbed water and sunlight the light needed to grow into a giant, and it completed the task successfully necessary for the survival of any tree, namely to rise above the twilight lower tier of the jungle. Now it is bathed in the sun, and this led to something surprising about the success of this wood were used. Others now on its branches grow thousands of different plants or species of ferns, orchids and figs. Thousands of plants grow on one the only tree. These plants outwitted the system and live according to the principle, if you can't win then use those who can. This happened all over the forest. Millions of years of evolution is a tricky thing. Plants growing on trees even become a home for various animals. This frog climbs up a tree dragging on your back your baby tadpole. For her this tree is a real Everest. The paws of these frogs stick to the trunk, but one mistake could be your last. More than 5,000 neighbors are already waiting for her in the tree. Tiny animals. A frog lives on it nose in one of the plants growing on the tree, namely the bromeliad, has inside water which makes it an ideal nursery, and the high altitude above the ground protects from the frog leaves terrestrial predators. Tadpole and goes after others. It is also necessary to smash everyone into own nursery, in own swimming pool. Bromeliad frog constantly visiting its children in every plant, and brings I give them food in the form of unfertilized, and so until they grow up and turn into frogs. Many species of frogs remain throughout my life in these bromeliad ponds on in the trees. Here they have everything they need: food, shelter, and water. Life, one might say it was a success, but there is only one problem. There is a species of monkeys that figured out what's in these plants. You can often find fresh meat, and now they began to look into these water lilies from water in search of frogs, but alone monkeys pose a risk to frogs living in the bromeliad pool. The rains end in the jungle regular, and they don't give a pool. The frogs would dry up. That's a good thing. But sometimes there is too much of a good thing. When water saturates the leaves and bark, ancient trees become heavier. Rainfalls wash away the top layer of soil. Centuries trees withstand heavy rains until one day this fall happens, giant, destroying an entire ecosystem living on it. When a tree falls, the size of the green roof of the jungle brush appears, and it doesn't stay unnoticed. Just imagine the undergrowth here remained for centuries in the shadow of it. Now suddenly he is illuminated by light. This means the start of a new race in attempts to fill this vacant position under seeds waiting for their time in the sun. Everyone is trying to sprout. Climbers overtake each other, start quickly, and immediately choke others. Sprouts very quickly fallen giant, all covered with young vegetation. The void fills and turns into luxurious clearing. However, in addition to tropical rains to giant trees, other things are threatening too. Just this, it's not all the plants that grow on them are harmless and peaceful, and here just the seeds of one of them along with animal feces were brought to branch. This plant needs more nutrients than it can find on the tree, and therefore it begins to do something strange. While most trees grow upward light, it works completely differently, and its roots sink into the darkness, descent down, reaching 50 m in length. This descent may take years, but in the end eventually the plant begins to reach the ground. It doesn't pose a threat yet for its owner on which it grows. Everything becomes different when its roots touch the ground and penetrate the soil, obtaining water and nutrients from the soil substances. The roots become thicker. Some animals take advantage of the situation, use these thin roots to climb up to get the fruits. If these roots were here, there would be a monkey. I never dared to go to such heights because one mistake and you're dead. because these trees taller than 20-story buildings and meanwhile the plants release the parasite more and more new roots, where the roots are they touch they intertwine together. Now, the fate of the giant tree becomes a foregone conclusion, turns out to be deadly. Years will pass in the embrace of the strangler ficus, and these roots will strangle the owner. As they grow, growth ficus also absorbs large part of water and nutrients intended for the owner. Defeated giant tree unable to grow, he will die. He will be killed by his own parasite. Decades later, only rotting pieces will remind you that there once stood a huge tree here. Ficus strangler leaning on its roots stands on the side of the remains of the Terre Haute winter in the eternal struggle for energy. Now he will use his sons. Ficus gives breeding positions many fruits that flock to animals from all over the area. They are in a week here, they eat everything, and then later along with carry seeds with their excrement. Ficus on other trees and wheel samsara gives rise to ficus stranglers, create truly mesmerizing pictures. It's not every day you see how huge roots hanging from a large heights. So, as we already know, trees giants are not invulnerable, killed by natural disasters and others. Plants, however, this is not the only. Some animals are a threat to them to pose a danger to this plant. It was 80 million years for the development to be effective. Protection is anchor, one of the most plants protected from animals in the world. His tall and slippery trunk, which exudes poisonous branch juice only on at the very top, because there is nothing to grab onto. And although this giant is invulnerable to animals, but the paradox is that exactly that's why animals kill him. The invulnerability of the tree played an evil trick on him. The joke is that the birds quickly understood that since there is no predator on this tree can climb, then it means it is an ideal place for nesting. Every time during the monsoon season, the tree attracts hundreds of shiny starlings that nest on it. And naturally, they defecate here too. Every year birds produce more than quarter-ton of litter, toxic chemicals in the droppings. They create a dead zone surrounding tree roots, absorb toxins, and they move along the trunk into each leaf, and eventually the branches begin to fall off, and along with them are nests. But these are not birds. Stops branch by branch. Poison tree slowly dies, became a victim of its own success. There is another similar tree nearby, suffered the same fate. It died, and as already begins to decompose. It has absorbed mushrooms. If we are talking about real ones, giant trees have no equal here. The famous Californian redwood is real. Titans are without a doubt the most big trees on the ground. They can reach a height of more than 100 m and weigh like 20 blue whales. Every day they lift along their trunk from 2,000 to 3,000 water to the height of a 30-story building. Sequoias grow all their lives. They don't have height restrictions. For example, the most tallest sequoia in the world for 800 years of life reached a height of 116 m, which is higher than the Statue of Liberty, and one of the main reasons why she almost stopped growing. Woodpeckers that damaged its trunk on the very top. Besides this, when the redwoods grow too high atmospheric, the pressure becomes too high for them. It is becoming increasingly difficult to deliver water up, and the top leaves begin to dry out, and it is the environment that is dying, limits their growth, and not the trees themselves. In an ideal environment, these giants could, some of these trees will live forever for 2,000 years. Their amazing imagination. The height attracts many climbers, and some extreme sports enthusiasts climb without use of any additional equipment. With the exception of safety, these coniferous forests receive ropes, solar energy, not a couple of months a year like taiga, and half a year. That's why these trees grow 10 times faster than their northern counterparts, brothers, and live. Thousands of tea are transferred to south of Britain. There are even older ones growing here, trees than sequoia. Some are 4,000 years old, and one of these species here in Sac sometimes bring local residents to panic. A frightening way of pollination in warm climate. Spring days, the inflorescences open, male trees releasing large clouds. Their volume of pollen becomes so large that firefighters often receive calls, supposedly a forest fire. While the pollen settles, it can get on female trees to fertilize them. We return to Madagascar. Here in the arid part of the island can be found one very interesting prickly and impenetrable forest Like the one you won't see plants anywhere else. Its entire trunk is buried in leaves small size, suitable for minimal moisture loss, and reliable, protected by thorns, extremely unfriendly earth. But these are not the only prickly ones. There are several more types of trees in the world, who instead of being a victim leaves or branches for protection use needles, such as Ceiba gorgeous, ready to reflect any. It's definitely better not to mess with her. Attack some trees' thorns can reach 20 centimeters. Like a game charcoal, it has spines so big and sharp that several once they punctured tractor tires. Well, when people came across them, they broke bones. There is a theory that such spikes the tree acquired during the mammoths and other large animals to defend themselves from them, but they became extinct, and therefore now, she doesn't need such large needles. However, evolution is too slow to the plant adjusted so quickly, and eliminated her spines, and this is one of the most unusual all the trees you can imagine. Imagine the rainbow eucalyptus, and it immediately stands out among all other types. Eucalyptus with its coloring has come down. It's like this tree is from a child's fantasy. Is the only species of eucalyptus which grows in the wild northern hemisphere. Due to its external, they love to use it as an ornamental plant. Bark coloring: the bark constantly changes and falls off annually, but always at different times. The inner layer is bright green, but according to as it matures it darkens and changes its shade, so you get a layering of blue, purple, orange, and dark burgundy tones. Due to their qualities, this tree is actively used for making plain white paper, due to which there is excessive cutting down these trees, in general excessive deforestation. This is a